Okay, I'm speaking to, very roughly, and I'm not going to say stuff which isn't in, two articles in the last two issues of the Weekly Worker in July, which are on this topic. Background to it, in the Euro elections, the CPGB called for a Labour vote, and this was controversial among comrades. I think partly controversial because we were not calling, we called for conditional support for no, we were willing to call for conditional support for candidates of the No to EU, Yes to Democracy platform if they were prepared to say no to Fortress Britain, let's have no immigration controls, free movement of labour, and if they were prepared to say yes to democracy, yes to the Republic, Republican democracy, and control from below, including, among other demands, popular militia and the right to bear arms. And this was controversial in CPGB, and one of the aspects which was controversial in CPGB, which is in fact actually a controversy much wider on the British left, is the British Labour Party still a, quote, bourgeois workers' party? Lenin's original tag seems to be bourgeois Labour Party, taken from Engels, says bourgeois Labour Party of the right wing of the trade unions in the 1890s. Yeah. Was this ever a correct characterisation? But assuming that it was ever a correct characterisation, has the Labour Party now gone so far to the right, so much become the creature of capital, that it has ceased to be in any sense a bourgeois workers' party? And if so, then the question arises, and I want to be very cautious about this, it's not uncommon for people, leftists in the United States, to say that the next step for the American left is the construction of a Labour Party, an independent Labour Party based on the trade unions. Yeah. And that is not a senseless idea in United States politics. I'm not saying it's the right idea, because I actually don't think it is the right idea for the left in the United States, because it's evading the question that the left in the United States is divided into even more tiny local sects, even more localised than the and tiny than the sects in Great Britain. You know? But in the first place, that's number one. Number two, it's not at all obvious, actually, that political dynamics in the United States would actually support the creation of a Labour Party. The nearest that the United States came, in the British sense, the nearest the United States came to independent political representation of Labour was the Socialist Party in the very early 20th century and into just after the First World War, and then the Communist Party in the in connection with the rise of the CIO in the 1930s and 40s, which rather suggests that actually the road to a mass workers' party in the United States is not through a Labour Party based on the trade unions. But that's an issue on one side. It's not stupid to say, let's create a Labour Party as a task of the left in the United States. It is, and it has been, this is not novelty. CPGB has been saying this since the time of Scargill's Socialist Labour Party. It is stupid and pointless for the left to say, let's create a new Labour Representation Committee, let's create a new Labour Party, let's create a new, quote, old Labour, because there already is a Labour Party in the UK. It's the Labour Party. The Labour Party is still, has not become, like the United States Democratic Party, a party of one fraction of capital. Not to say that one fraction of capital doesn't from time, different fractions of capital at various different times don't support the Labour Party for their own interests, but it is not foundationally a classical bourgeois party. So that's the fundamental point. It's not only opportunist to create a party which aims to recapitulate the Labour Party in some sense, whether it's Socialist Labour Party or Socialist Alliance or Republican Socialist Party as understood as a halfway house party, or Respect or No to EU. It's not just opportunist, it's just pointless and hopeless, and what you're going to get is get out of your Labourism is absolutely negligible, political Labourism is absolutely negligible results. If there is going to be a new Workers' Party in Britain which means something, it will have to involve a political break with Labourism. And that political break with Labourism in practice amounts to, whatever practical name you give such an organisation, that the party which you would have to create would be in substance communist. That is to say that it would be for the working class not merely being represented within bourgeois society, but taking over from bourgeois society. It would have to be for radical democracy, both within the party and positively subordinating the trade union officials, party officials, elected representatives, and within the society as a whole. And it would have to be for the international unity of, stand for the international unity of the working class, not for defending Britain's interests and class collaboration between capital and labour in order to maximise the defence of Britain's interests. Okay, so that's the background to this question, and the concrete question is the Labour Party, if it were the case that the Labour Party had turned into a British analogue of the Democratic Party, then it would still probably be a mistake, and an opportunist mistake, to try and build a new Labour Party in Britain. But nonetheless, it wouldn't be a stupid, senseless, dead-end attempt to occupy political space which doesn't exist. Which is what these various left unity projects, which pretend to be the old Labour in one way or another, or proposed Labourite policies in one way or another, have in practice been. So what does this expression bourgeois workers' party mean? I go in first place to the history of it. As I said, Engels characterised the right wing of the TUC, which was opposed to campaigning around the 8-hour day in the 1890s, as, quote, the bourgeois workers' party, whereas the socialist wing of the TUC, which wanted to campaign around the 8-hour day as part of the international movement, it was the 8-hour day campaign was one of the central early campaigns of the Second International. This was the non-bourgeois, as it were, the socialist wing, was the opponents of the, quote, bourgeois Labour Party. Then in 1917, I think it is 1917, Lenin writes an article called Imperialism and the Split in Socialism, which is using the theoretical arguments of imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, and developing them in some ways in a more explicit way. And in that context, Lenin revives this expression of Engels. And he says, once upon a time, Britain had a monopoly of colonies, and because Britain had a monopoly of colonies, it was only Britain which could have a bourgeois Labour Party. Now, imperialism has spread, and all the imperialist powers, by which he means really the great powers, he doesn't include Russia, for example, which could be said to be imperialist in a different sense. All the imperialist powers have their own bourgeois Labour parties. And where do these bourgeois Labour parties come from? The answer is because the super profits of imperialism allow the imperialist bourgeoisie to make concessions to what he says is a narrow layer, the aristocracy of labour. And the bourgeois Labour Party is based on the labour aristocracy. It's a bourgeois force within the workers' movement. He says there isn't that much difference